dramatically reduce spending. Get spending, say, we're going to cut and dramatically, and people have got to get their minds around, reduce the size of the federal government by half. Not go back to 2008 spending levels like the Republican Congress is talking about now, but go back to 1980 spending levels. So pull back the social welfare programs and say people aren't going to be able to retire until they're 75.
It'll separate the wheat from the chaff because you got all those people in the U.S. who think they're entitled to be taken care of, and they are not going to like that.
But that's where you see the riots occurring in Greece. Student loans cut back.
Exactly.
And all these major entitlement programs.
And the sad thing is that in a properly functioning free society, the people are not entitled to one penny out of the government coffers. If they need charity, they go to the churches and such and the charitable organizations, not to the government. And other than that, you know, they're responsible for their own lives. The sad thing is that we've got so far from that.
The socialism that we've had, which has been creeping, and I say Republicans and Democrats alike because, you know, you've had George W. Bush expand a prescription drug program on top of Medicare. But beginning with Franklin Roosevelt, the idea that there is a social welfare net or an obligation of the government to provide these entitlement rights, write checks to and spend money for people in their retirement and they need medical care, if they want to get university education, if they're on welfare, they need food stamps. We can't afford all this anymore. Public employees at the state level, you're going to see states begin to go bankrupt.
We never could afford it. We just made it look like we could. I have a couple other things I want to ask you about before we run out of time. So let's see if we can shift gears a little bit. Americans are in the midst of what I consider to be a second Great Depression, even though we're told that officially we're not even in a recession. Record numbers of foreclosures are happening. Real unemployment is over 23%, with no end in sight. Now, despite this, property taxes are skyrocketing in many places around the country. Now, my understanding is property taxes relate to the value of homes, but home values are going down. Property taxes are going up. Why is that?
Well, it's mostly, again, the states that need the revenue in order to, for instance, pay public employee retirement programs, are increasing property taxes as a way to get more tax revenue. Unfortunately, it's self-defeating because what you do is you push out of the state the higher value homeowners who look for lower tax environments in which to live, and you collect less tax revenue as a consequence. Also, then people get valuations of their homes for tax purposes, which are wildly out of relationship to the value of the house for resale purposes, and those issues have to be fought with the, at the local level, where the home value is set by the municipality or whatever entity is setting the value of that house for tax purposes. States like New Jersey and New York are just off the wall when it comes to property taxes, and there's a limit. They can't be raised anymore. Raised anymore will be totally self-defeating. They're already too high, pushing people out of the state.
Absolutely.
This is a limit. We're reaching a limit of the ability to gain revenue for the government through taxation. We're right at that wall already.
Well, and yes, I mean, it really is basic. The government is spending more than it can take in, and if it tries to take in more, it simply destroys the source of its revenue and makes them less able to fund the government in the first place.
Correct.
You mentioned retirements. Recently in the U.S. and around the world, governments are preparing to confiscate retirement funds and pensions. Now, pensions are legally considered to be earnings, not benefits. In other words, you've actually done the work for the pension. So you've done the work, the money belongs to you, as opposed to a benefit that can be taken from you at the whim of government. Even so, governments think they can just take what they want without regard to the true owners of those funds. So again, what's going on, and what, if anything, can people do to fight against this theft of their earnings?
Well, you find this happening in, again, failed states. Argentina confiscated private retirement funds. It's going on now in countries like Hungary, other countries in Europe. are looking to confiscate retirement funds for the government to stay alive. They'll give people worthless government bonds. In the United States, you've already had hearings, the Department of Labor and Treasury, about requiring people to put a government annuity within their 401ks and their IRAs. That government annuity would be funded by Treasury bonds, paying virtually no yield. And again, Treasury bonds might end up being worthless when it comes time to, at maturity, to use their value. The governments are looking to do this. At the moment, people shouldn't panic in the United States. It hasn't been done yet. But, a couple steps more desperate in terms of the federal government and the states to collect money, everything's going to be looked at as a way for the government to come in and grab value to stay afloat.
Are these tactics potentially going to affect private retirements, that not 401ks, not IRAs, not government-included retirement funds, but ones that, say, private companies set up for their workers?
Sure, any ERISA plan. Any ERISA plan at all could be looked at to have a government annuity forced within it. That's why the Department of Labor is in these hearings. The Department of Labor is looking at ERISA plans and looking at them under the same characteristics as the tax-favored 401k or IRA, which can be employment-based but don't have to be employment-based.
So is there anything that people can do? I mean, this is absurd. This is money that you worked your whole life for. You have earned it. It belongs to you. And the government's just coming in and saying, we need it, we're going to take it.
Well, they haven't done it yet, but they've held the hearings in Washington.
Yeah, well, they're presuming they have the right to do so.
Well, again, desperate, failed states don't worry about their right to confiscate. They just confiscate what they need to try to stay alive and let people contest it in the courts. Because they know it takes a long time to contest it in the courts. By the time it's settled in the courts, the issue is going to be moot because the government will have the money.
And like I say, folks, this is why I say to you, if you knew you were royalty, would you behave any differently dealing with your public servants when they do things like this? Just a little more on retirement funds. The confiscation tactic seems to be, dare I say it, a global trend. Like you said, Hungary, I believe Poland's looking at something like that. Yeah. England is looking at something like that. Argentina, et cetera, all over the place. Now, why would that be so? Is there some central global body determining that it's time to use this tactic? I mean, is this a genuine conspiracy?
I think it's more just the governments get desperate and they look around and they say, where are their pools of money? There's pools of money sitting in retirement accounts. Several $1 trillion in the United States. You could say we could fund 2 or 3 years federal deficit if we could get all that retirement money just by Treasury bonds. And the governments are thinking, well, maybe in 2 or 3 years the crisis will be over, our tax revenues will be up, and we'll be able to go back to business as usual. It's like thinking about survival tactics. The governments aren't thinking long term. Governments are thinking about avoiding collapse right now. And the federal government, the Obama administration, will be happy to run deficits as big and as long as they can get away with it. The point is, at some point or other, the Federal Reserve just can't buy another $1 trillion worth of Treasury debt. And when that happens, it has to be sold in the open markets. The open markets are going to charge more interest in order to put the money into the government Treasury bonds. It's what's happening now in countries like Spain and Portugal. When Greece collapsed, it wasn't because Greece couldn't get borrowings in order to keep their government afloat. They could get borrowings, but just at exorbitant rates. And you can't pay those exorbitant rates because you're just digging a deeper hole. That's when the IMF comes in and starts dictating austerity programs to governments like Greece, and it could happen here.
What about the idea of having states that have gotten themselves in such economic trouble just cutting the IMF cords and repudiating all their debts, declaring themselves, we are no longer part of the global economy, we are our own economy, we are repudiating these debts, okay, and we are back to ground zero. I know that's radical, I know that's crazy, but what prevents it?
Well, nothing prevents it, but a country that would do that would, first of all, be immediately out of all the world trade. You couldn't trade with anybody. No one would take your currency. And that would be pretty catastrophic given the the buildup we've done on world trade in the past few decades, because goods and service flow would just end.
I guess I'm a big nationalist, so that's why it would occur to. Let me fit in one last question with you. There seems to have been an enormous amount of fraud and resultant theft of both real and personal property by the banks. We receive reports almost every day of banks going in and destroying homes only to learn later that the foreclosure was not conducted properly. Yet the banks never seem to be held accountable. They're never hurt for these actions, and the victims remain homeless. What is going on here? Do you think this is part of what's supposed to be happening or what's planned, or is this just like a symptom of the collapse of the economy? And how do you think it's going to shake out in the end?
First of all, if people are having their homes, and you're getting notices that your home's going to be foreclosed, go get a lawyer immediately and try to head this off. Because you've got to fight it from the very beginning to demand that the bank has the documentation they need to have before they go foreclose your home. After they foreclose your home, the courts are not going to make them repair the damage very much because it's such an unconscionable mess paying people back after they've been thrown out of their homes, or the home's been sold, somebody else is living in it now. Will you throw those people out and restore the original owners?
But there should be some make whole concept.
There's no question about it.
When people have violated that. Well, it's just
the courts aren't doing it, or the courts get these banks to put up a certain amount of money as retribution, and they dole it out to some of the people who were foreclosed. The truth is, almost all the foreclosures that have been going on since this crisis started, since about 2008, are suspect.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely.
And almost everybody who's been foreclosed probably has some claim for damages.
We are out of time. Dr. Jerome Corsi, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. www.1776nation.com. That's the numbers, 1776nation.com. You want to know more about Dr. Jerome Corsi. Thanks so much. Happy New Year again, and I sure hope that we'll see you again here on the Global Freedom Report, not too distant future.
I look forward to it. Happy New Year, and thank you.